Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've got a few games to discuss. We're going to break down Alabama's win over Arkansas State that happened on Friday night. Then we'll break down Alabama's big win in Baton Rouge that happened on Saturday night, which I was in attendance for. And then we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown on the McNeese State game that's going to be happening in Coleman Coliseum on Monday. So if you are listening to this, it'll be tonight. This is going to come out first thing Monday morning. So first off, sorry for the slight delay in the upload coming out. I was planning to have it come out Sunday evening, as I had mentioned, but I had some car troubles going down to Baton Rouge, so we got into town a little later than I had originally anticipated. On our way back Sunday night, we had to pick my car back up, so it was a lot longer getting back than I had originally anticipated. So hopefully everybody is able to listen to this and kind of get the breakdown of the Arkansas State as well as LSU games, and then the McNeese State game is going to be happening tonight, as I mentioned. So we're going to start with that Arkansas State game. And this is a game that really was a lot closer than people anticipated, myself included. We knew that Brian Hodgson is a good coach, right? He coached with Nate Oates for 8 years at Buffalo and at Alabama. He was a part of some championship teams, and he definitely knows what he's doing. And it was clear that Hodgson is an elite recruiter, right? He had some guys that, in my opinion, are a little bit punching above his weight class for the school that Arkansas State is, right? You have two transfers from Arkansas in Pinion and Ford, which we talked about. And then the big one was Kobe Julian, right? You had the transfer from Louisiana. There was an all-conference player. The all-conference player at Louisiana transfers over interconference into Arkansas State. And Julian really was one of the keys in this game for Arkansas State. He has 20 points. Used 10 of 12 for the line. Had 6 rebounds. He was really a do-it-all player for Arkansas State in this game. But in my opinion, the telltale sign of this game was, and the difference in Alabama this game versus Alabama in years past, is if this was Alabama last season, I think Alabama loses this game kind of going away. Arkansas State played really, really hard, but the thing that kept Alabama in this game was their defense, because their shooting was just not there. There's no other way to say it. Alabama's free throw shooting was abysmal. It was 63% for the game, 28 of 44. You definitely want to see that better. Nate talked about, you had some of your better shooters at the line, having Mark Sears at the line 16 times. He goes 11 of 16. Philon's at the line. He goes 5 of 9, right? You have a couple of guys that definitely you expect to shoot better than that. And just when it all adds up, it ends up to be a really, really bad night shooting the ball from the line. And then from the three-point line, you were awful, right? 6 of 31 for 19%. And you really expect Alabama to be much better than this. Mark Sears goes 0 for 5, a few of those open looks. You really don't expect Mark to go 0 for 5 from open threes really ever. Same with Latrell Wrightsell, right? He goes 1 for 9. And Aiden Sherrill goes 0 for 3, right? Aiden Sherrill, that one doesn't shock me quite as much. He's coming back from injury. He is, getting his rhythm in the new system. That one doesn't quite as shock me. But 1 for 9 from Latrell Wrightsell. I know he's coming back from injury. But as good a shooter as Latrell is, you just don't expect him to go 1 for 9 from 3 really ever, right? From 3, really the only guys that shot the ball okay to well were Aiden Holloway goes 50%. Darion Reed goes 50%, and Mo D hits another 3, right? So Mo D currently leads the team in three-point percentage at 100%. He's 1 for 1 in back-to-back games. And actually, if you go back to the scrimmage, which obviously isn't going to count for his season percentage, but he was 1 for 1 in that as well, right, in that Memphis scrimmage. So it's just really, really good to see that. I will say that Alabama's depth really showed in this game. Alabama had 3 guys that end up with 4 fouls in Jaron Stevenson, Cliff Omori, and Aiden Holloway. Aiden Holloway and Stevenson both did it in very short minutes. You don't love to see that. I don't think it's something that we're going to expect to continue on. I think part of that had to do with the officials seemed to be a little ticky-tack. I'm really surprised that neither team had a guy foul out in this game. Arkansas State ended up having 4 guys with 4 fouls, right? This was a game that had quite a lot of fouls, 28 for Arkansas State, 24 for Alabama. So it did really feel like that standpoint. But Arkansas State definitely, to their credit, played really, really hard in this game. Even though Alabama did not shoot well, Arkansas State made sure to, force Alabama to defend them the whole shot clock. Also, Alabama, they got more fast break points than Alabama, right? It was 13-12, but they did well in transition, which we expect out of a former NATO's assistant, right? This doesn't really shock anyone. The other thing that really surprised me in this game is they held their own in points in the paint. Alabama had 42 and Arkansas State had 36. I really expected this to be a place where Alabama would have a lot of success, similar to that first game of the year, because Alabama has such big bodies. Now, part of that may have to do with the fouls that were being called. Part of that may have to do with the way that certain players were going to the rim, where it felt, at moments it really felt like they knew they were going to get a foul called, so maybe they weren't going quite as aggressively to the rim. And then if the foul wasn't called, it's just a bad shot, which Nate, often will talk about. Like, you can't go up expecting to get fouled. You have to go up, planning to make the shot, and if you get fouled, you get fouled. So that's really the big ones. The place where Alabama had a lot of success in this game was really in 2 spots. That's the spots that they, or I expect Alabama to be very good this season, and they were in this one. And it was second chance points, and that was Alabama wins the offensive rebounding battle 14-8, and they win the second chance points battle 21-7, right? I expect Alabama to do that quite a lot this season, especially with the size lineups they have and the rebounders which they have on the team. And then bench points. They win that 33-17. I think the bench points number is even going to go up when you get a guy like Chris Youngblood back. Just the talent on this team is incredible, and so the guys you're bringing off the bench, by and large, are going to be able to score, right? Like an Aiden Holloway is going to be able to score. Darion Reed is going to be able to score. It wouldn't shock me if, Grant Nelson at this point is currently coming off the bench, right? I don't expect him to come off the bench for the majority of the season, but at the end of the day, the rotations which Alabama has is going to have a lot of guys coming off the bench, which are very elite players and could play at many other places. But the depth is really something that Alabama has and has in spades. We talked about Mark Sears going 0 for 5 from 3. He still finishes in 19 points. A lot of that has to do with the amount of times he gets to the line. But Alabama has got 5 guys in in double figures. Mark with 19, then LeBaron and Cliff both with, and Grant all with 12, and then Darion gets 10, right? So Alabama gets 5 guys in double figures, and I think that's going to be a theme of this season. I would expect most games you're going to see somewhere between 4 and 6 guys in double figures, right? I think that the scoring will be spread out for the majority of the season on this team. I think that you will see a lot of times where everyone that plays on the court gets a basket. The only person that didn't score in this game is actually Aiden Sherrill. He does end up with 5 rebounds, 3 offensive in his time on the floor, as well as a block, right? So he was very productive in his time on the floor. But he obviously didn't score. So that's the thing that I really expect out of this Alabama team. I do expect that Alabama, this type of game is going to prepare them for the future, right? Because I think that Arkansas State shows Alabama that you're not just going to waltz into every game and win every game by 40, right? Alabama needed to learn that lesson, right? Alabama needed to learn the lesson that you have to actually execute. Nate talked about in the post game that they were missing passes where, if it would have been a 1 extra pass, you would have the open 3. Or if it would have been, people were trying to do a sidestep 3 or this or that, right? Just where he just did not feel like the ball moved quite as much as it needed to. Alabama finishes with just 13 assists on 27 made baskets, which isn't terrible, but isn't up to the standard in which Alabama expects to be, because a lot of those threes potentially that they missed, if they were in transition or if they were off the catch and it was a good pass, you have a lot better chance of making it off of that, right? So I think that's what Nate's going to want to clean up. Arkansas State, like I said, to their credit, they tied this game with about 7 minutes to go. So really, really credit to Brian Hodgson and what he was able to do with Arkansas State. I think part of this had to do with what Alabama missed. They missed a lot of free throws, they missed a lot of 3-point shots, but their defense and their intensity was able to, come out with the win in this game. But all credit to Arkansas State. That's a really, really good team. I fully expect them to be competing for their league. I think that team's going to beat some teams that they potentially would not have. And I think that Hodgson has a really, really good group of guys, especially with the transfers he has brought in, where I think that they have a real ability to compete at the top of that league. So now we're going to shift over to Baton Rouge and the game that happened on Saturday night. And as I mentioned, I was in attendance for this game. Me and my girlfriend drove down. As I mentioned at the top, we had some car troubles getting down, but we did make it down to Baton Rouge and, hung out with a work friend of mine. And, it was a fun atmosphere. And I was really expecting a very raucous environment. The tailgate atmosphere, if you've ever been to Baton Rouge, is very, very good. Part of it has to do with just how the stadiums and field and everything is set up. It was very cool. We went and saw Mike, and then we get into the game, and the game very quickly turned into a blowout. And I talked at length about this game in the preview episode. And in my opinion, I thought the two keys were the offensive line and our ability to block and not have Jalen get pressure when they're rushing just 4 guys, and Jalen's legs. And I'm not going to say that the offensive line piece didn't matter, but I think it didn't matter as much as it could have due to the fact that Jalen's legs were the difference, right? In this game, Jalen Milroe was Superman. There's no other way to put it. With the ball in his hands, he's absolutely elite. For anybody who's seen Jalen run the ball, you know this, right? I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that Milroe can do things with the ball in his hands that most quarterbacks just can't and most players just can't, right? And that really showed in this game. Jalen finishes with 12 rushes for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns. One of those rushes was a 72-yard rush off a zone read, and actually that one was off a design. And, you have Booker come across the block, set the edge. He cuts it in, 72 yards to the house untouched. He's outrunning safeties and corners that have an angle, right? Milroe, again, with the ball in his hands, is absolutely incredible. And I thought that it really showed in this game. In my opinion, this game, as much as, for anybody that listens to these episodes, I talked in the Missouri game about how in that first half, a lot of us were calling for, hey, it looks like Milroe's hurt. The only thing we know to say is he's not playing like we expect, so he must be hurt. And in the second half, he really kind of silenced some people of maybe he's not hurt because he played so well in the second half. In my opinion, this LSU game tells me he had to have at least been kind of hurt because what we saw in this LSU game was a different quarterback than what we even saw in that second half of the Missouri game. Milroe's willingness to run the ball and their willingness to even call the designed runs, and not just the design runs inside the the red zone where you have empty backfield, guard pull. We've seen that all year, but to actually call runs where, you're first down or second down, middle of the field, and you're calling a Jalen run, right? We saw a lot more of that in this game. You also saw a little better deep ball from Jalen. It felt like in some of the Tennessee game or the South Carolina game, something was just a little bit off, and I don't know if he had something tweaked, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be one. It just feels like something was slightly off. I don't know what the answer was, but it's going to be very difficult to convince me that something wasn't off, because the Milroe which we saw in this LSU game was awesome, right? He did miss one deep ball that was to Emmanuel Henderson, which he had that would have been a touchdown. His other deep ball to Ryan Williams, I think probably should have been a catch and should have been a touchdown. If it had not been raining, I think Ryan comes down with that ball. I think that has to do with the fact that the ball was so wet, and Ryan did have to outstretch, and I think with the wetness of everything, he just isn't able to contain it as he goes to the ground, right? But he has 2 deep shots. Like I said, one of them was a little bit of an overthrow. One of them was a tiny, tiny bit overthrow, but I think Ryan still catches that ball if the ball is dry. But in general, I thought that Jalen just had control of this game because Alabama does not need him to do what what LSU needs Garrett Nussmeier to do, right? We talked about Garrett Nussmeier being somebody that LSU is not a running team, and LSU wants to step back and throw the ball 40, 50 times. In the rain, they still threw the ball 42 times, right? In the rain, they still left Nussmeier out there down 42-6, right? I mean, this is a situation where, in my opinion, that's a problem, right? If I'm an LSU fan, I'm very upset that they left Nussmeier in this game. I attribute it to similar to like the Tyrone Prothro injury against Florida. Alabama's up big in that game. Prothro gets injured. In my opinion, whether you're up big or down big, why do you have your starters in a blowout? Like, nothing's going to change. Brian Kelly was, seen as, commenting to the officials, the game's basically over and they're still sending 8. You still got your starting quarterback out there. You've got your starting receivers out there. If you've still got Nussmeier and Kyron Lacey out there, then we can do whatever the heck we want to do. And even then, we can still do whatever we want to do. But, why are you still throwing your starting quarterback out there? Why didn't you just run the ball and say, hey, this game's over, we'll deal with the next time? It was just a very weird situation with how the end of this game played. But I thought the beginning of this game and how Alabama just took control early, took the crowd completely out of the game. Part of that had to do with the weather. I thought that there was a couple of moments where, even though the weather was going, that if Alabama had just let their foot off the gas for a split second and let LSU get back in the game, the crowd would have been back into it, because the fans that left early, super early, it really felt like we're in kind of the non-student sections where it felt like those fans maybe either were going to the concourse to drink, or maybe they had some food section, or I'm not fully sure about all the amenities at Tiger Stadium, but it really felt like those fans may have just went into a different area. But then when Alabama really busted it open, right? When Alabama gets up 28-6, and the big play was Alabama gets stopped on 4th down and then immediately gets the blitz home and sacks Nussmeier with a fumble, gets the ball back and scores, right? That play, in my opinion, was kind of the nail in the coffin for LSU. It was the situation when all the LSU fans really started streaming for the exits, right? By the end of this game, there were more Alabama fans in the stadium than LSU fans. And this is a pretty insane sight because I'm not sure how the TV broadcast caught it, but Alabama only had one part of the upper deck where we were up at the very, very top, maybe the last 6 or 7 rows, maybe 10 rows in the upper deck in one section. And then they had some lower bowl seats down where the band was, and it was not a ton, right? But LSU fans, it looked worse than a COVID game, right? There were just not fans in this stadium. Maybe 5,000 fans by the time this game ended. And that was something that I just didn't expect to see in Tiger Stadium, right? Obviously, like I said, the weather definitely had an impact on this game. The amount that Alabama was up had an impact on this game. But I thought that Alabama's offense and defense's ability just to take the crowd completely out of this game, and what Milroe was able to do with his legs, was the difference, right? I cannot go without talking about the defense, though. I would love to credit what Kane Womack has done, right? He got a ton of criticism after the Vanderbilt game, and rightly so. He had done a poor job preparing the team and having them ready to play Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt outcoached us. There's no other way to say it. We lost that game because we were outcoached. However, since then, the turnaround in which the defense has done, and I would even go as far as to say that Tennessee game that we lost, the defense was not the reason why, right? The Missouri game, they get the shutout. In this LSU game, they give up just 13 points, really 6, and then Nussmeier gets a touchdown with 7 seconds left in the game. at the end of the day, what Kane Womack has done with the defense in the last few weeks has been incredible. And that's been even with some injuries. And there was another injury in this game, Q Robinson, from what we've heard. It sounds like he's going to be out for the rest of the year, maybe a broken forearm. But, you have an injury to Keon Sabb, and you replace him in the back end with Bray Hubbard. And Bray Hubbard now has 2 interceptions in his absence and has looked incredible in most of the games, or in the 2 games that he's played since. I just think that what Kane Womack has done with the defense, what he's done with the secondary, he's mixing up pressures a lot more. What he's showing pre-snap versus post-snap has been a lot better. There also was a comment that Deontay Lawson made that apparently in the warm-up to the lead-up to this game, Austin Mack was mimicking on the scout team Garrett Nussmeier. And the interception in which Deontay Lawson caught in this game, Austin Mack simulated at the goal line as well, and Deontay Lawson picked it, right? So it's even a standpoint of the film and everything was coming together to the point that the exact play that the interception was caught on, he was able to get one in practice as well. So they're seeing exactly what the opposing team is going to do, right? It was just very clear that this team was prepared. This team knew what LSU was going to throw at them, and this team knew exactly what they needed to do to win it, right? The one kind of hiccup of this team, you could have said, is there still were a couple of penalties that, in a closer game potentially could have been costly, like you had a penalty which stopped you from getting a kick. The kick ended up getting missed, and again, it was rainy and windy. I'm not super concerned about that, but they caused you to end up having to punt. There were a couple of other penalties in this game that I think that you really just need to kind of clean up. But by and large, on the road in the hostile environment that could have been in Tiger Stadium, awesome. Absolutely incredible. I will say that if you have not seen the closing call that Chris Stewart did on the radio, check it out. I know that Ryan Phillips on Twitter posted it. I retweeted it earlier today. Just go check it out. The Crimson Tide Sports Network guys have done a great job. Obviously, Chris is absolutely incredible. He's been with basketball and taking over football this year, and it was absolutely hilarious, kind of his call to end this game. But we're going to switch over to the McNeese State game and talk about it, and then we will get out of here. So Alabama's next opponent in basketball is McNeese State. And for those of you that have been living under a rock, McNeese State is coached by Will Wade. And if that name is familiar to you, it is because Will Wade is the former coach of LSU. And he was the coach at LSU when Alabama won the SEC title championship game in 2021. He's a very good coach. There's never been, question about that. He followed Shaka Smart at VCU and then, had success at LSU and was fired immediately following an FBI investigation in which he was, commented of having a strong-ass offer, right? So if you ever hear or see tweets about a strong-ass offer, that was Will Wade. He was caught on a wiretap offering players money, which in today's day and age is super common with NIL, but obviously this was pre-NIL, so was against the rules. And he gets a show cause, or he gets a reprimanded, let's say, and McNeese ends up hiring him. I believe his probation is off maybe this year. But either way, point being, he's the head coach at McNeese State. He has done a really good job at McNeese. Last season, they were a, kind of March Madness darling. They were somebody that a lot of people expected to have that 5-12 upset that happens most years. They were a 12 seed playing Gonzaga. Gonzaga ends up winning that game, and it ends up not happening. But McNeese, what Wade was able to do last season with McNeese was absolutely incredible, right? He does bring in. He is a great recruiter, right? And because of how he is able to coach, he is somebody that can bring in elite talent, and he's done that again this year. He brought over Brandon Murray, formerly of LSU. Actually, he spent a year at Ole Miss last season, but he came back to McNeese to play for Wade after starting a couple of games last season, right? He's somebody that really knows how to get the most out of his players. So when we talk about McNeese, that's the big thing that you need to look at is, yes, all the FBI stuff, all of the recruiting stuff with Will Wade is really funny. But he is a very good basketball coach, right? At the end of the day, he knows basketball. I fully expect him to get a high major job this cycle. There were a lot of comments that he wasn't going to leave McNeese after just 1 year. I expect him to get an offer and accept a job this cycle. But he's that kind of coach. He will be at a high major school very, very soon. Some schools, I'm sure, will want to stay away because of all of the recruiting stuff and all the things that happened prior, but he will get a top job, and for good reason, right? He's a very good basketball coach. So in the game that mattered, I guess, that McNeese has played, they've played one game against a team that you've heard of and one team against a team which you have not. The team you've heard of is South Dakota State, and the team you haven't is Biblical Studies. South Dakota State, they end up losing that game 80-73. That's the game which I'll kind of talk a little bit about who played a lot in that game and what style in which they played. When you look at Biblical Studies, a couple of things. One, that's I hate to say just a team on their schedule, just a team kind of to fill a void on the schedule. They're not an FBS team. They're not a Division I team, and they're also not ranked in KenPom. So, like, all the numbers which we'll talk about from a KenPom perspective are not taken into consideration when a team plays a non-Division I team. So just consider that when we do talk about the numbers. They may be slightly skewed as to having just a one-game sample size, but all games this early are going to have that, right? So just consider that when you're looking at this. So the guys that played a lot in that game were they have a lot of seniors, and currently their lineup, when you look at who plays on this team, it is 5 seniors and 4 juniors. So this is a very experienced basketball team. He is somebody that has done a good job bringing in transfers either last offseason that have stayed or this offseason in the sense of Brandon Murray and some others. And Will Wade, like I said, does a good job of getting the most out of his players. So you had 5 guys that played more than 20 minutes. It was your starters. And you get 15 points out of Garcia, 11 points out of Shumat, 18 points out of Breed, and Brandon Murray, again, the SEC transfer, only ends up having 8, right? He had a pretty slow game, went 0 for 3 from deep, had a couple of steals. But this is a team that I fully expect that is going to, if Alabama does not play their best, they are going to be able to beat you, right? That's what we talked about with Arkansas State. That's what we're going to talk about with McNeese, right? I think that if Alabama plays to their potential and looks at the Arkansas State game as, hey, we did not play well, this is what we have to clean up, this is how we have to get better, and this is how we beat McNeese, I think Alabama wins this game and wins this game going away, right? However, if Alabama, has some of the same issues that they had against Arkansas State, they're not moving the ball, they're taking bad shots, they're, not just, people talk about Nate Oates' offense wanting to take threes. It's not just about taking threes, it's about taking the most efficient shots. And if it's an open 3, it's a super efficient shot. If it's a contested 3, it's not, right? If it's a contested 3 and you could have passed it inside to get a dunk, why'd you take the 3, right? It's all about finding the open man, finding the most efficient shot. And that's the thing that Alabama's going to have to do in this game. Again, because if you do not play efficient basketball, if you do not play knowing, hey, this is what I need to do, this is how I need to do it to the best of my ability, then these teams can beat you. That's the whole reason why Nate Oates schedules the way he schedules. He openly will talk about, hey, I schedule very difficult because I don't want to be able to play a bad game and still win, right? I would not call Arkansas State a bad game, right? There were elements of that game which were not good, but there were still moments of that game that were very good, right? Your second chance points, the fight at which you saw, the defense, right? There were points in that game which were good, but Alabama has to do something well to win these games because he is not scheduling cupcake mid-majors, right? This McNeese team last season lost 3 games before the NCAA tournament, Again, they lost 3 games before the NCAA tournament, and so this is not a team which you should assume is going to be an immediate win. Do I think Alabama has a very good chance of winning this game? Absolutely. Will I be picking them to win this game? Absolutely. However, would it absolutely shock me if McNeese came out, shot lights out, Alabama had a poor shooting night, and we lost the game? I don't think it would, right? I would not expect it, and I think that I would give it a less than, 5% likelihood. But would it be blow my mind shocking? I don't know that it would, right? McNeese is a very good team. They're a very good mid-major, and I fully expect them to compete for an NCAA tournament bid and compete to try to win a game in the NCAA tournament as they potentially should have done last season, right? That is the type of team and coach that Will Wade is. I fully expect that. I know they lost against South Dakota State, which was their only legitimate game so far this season, but again, I still think that this is a very good team, and he's done a better job scheduling this season where, he scheduled Alabama and North Texas and Santa Clara and Mississippi State, all of these teams in the KenPom Top 100, whereas last season he had 2 games, I guess, in the KenPom Top 100 against VCU and Louisiana Tech, and they lost one of them, right? So this is a situation where Will Wade has done a much better job scheduling this season. Again, this is going to be an elite team. I fully expect them to win their conference. I fully expect that Will Wade will do a good job with this team. So let's talk about how they play, because I think that how they play will say impartially why I think that Alabama will win this game. But again, they have to play a good game to do it. So, when you look at the KenPom numbers, and again, these are only talking about the South Dakota State game. So, we're going to talk about what the numbers are so far, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened last season. Obviously, last season's team is not this season's team, but I think that you can draw some comparison because some of the numbers seem to line up last season versus this season, right? So the thing that jumps off the page at you is the spots on KenPom where they're green, right? The spots where they're better than most schools. And the place where they're better than average is getting other teams to commit fouls and not committing them themselves. They do not give up a ton of free throws, right? That is something that this team, by and large, was good at last season and has been good at so far this season. This team does a really good job on turnovers, offensively and defensively. They don't give up the ball a lot, but they do a very good job of taking over the ball, right? Getting steals, getting non-forced turnovers, just getting turnovers altogether. And the last thing is this team typically does a fairly good job at getting pretty efficient shots. In their first game, they did not. I would not consider that an indictment on what this team will be, however, right? I think they had a poor shooting night in that South Dakota State game. By and large, Will Wade is a fairly efficient coach and is looking for the efficient shot. Last season, their three-point percentage was 9th in the country. Their offensive and defensive steal percentage was top 10 in the country. Their turnover percentage was 10th in the country. This was a very good defensive team last season, and this is what Will Wade is going to try to coach to. He's going to try to coach to have his guys cause havoc on the defensive end, and it's going to be a slower game than what he's going to try to have it be a slower game than what Alabama wants, right? He is going to have his defense get into our guys, try to get steals, and he is going to have, I believe, the tempo of this game be a little slower. Last season, they were bottom 275. They were 277 and 345 from a defensive perspective. They really grinded teams to a halt on the defensive end. Obviously, Alabama is going to try to keep the pace of this game up. I think that if Alabama can keep the pace of this game up and do it without committing turnovers, I think Alabama can have a lot of success in this game. The other place where I think Alabama has a ton of success is on the rebounding standpoint. McNeese was not a great rebounding team last season. They were not a good rebounding team at the beginning of this game, the beginning of this season so far. I think that Alabama can have a lot of success on the boards, and I think that goes into McNeese has not done a very good job running teams off the three-point line, right? Last season, they gave up next to last in the country in number of three-point attempts, right? This is a game where it would not shock me if McNeese doesn't do a great job running Alabama off the three-point line. So this can kind of be twofold. I could definitely see this turning into a Wake Forest game where Alabama shoots a ton of threes and the right guys are taking the shots and the right guys are making them, and Alabama wins this game by a good bit, and it's kind of a blowout in Tuscaloosa. I could see that happening. I could also see that Alabama, McNeese doesn't do a great job running us off the line, but does a decent job not letting the shooters we want to get the shots. Now, granted, this team is a very good shooting team, so Alabama at one time can have a lot of guys that are great shooters on the court at one time. But I'm looking at it similar to like wanting to have, when Arizona let Grant Nelson take a ton of threes. I think that there are moments where it would not shock me if McNeese tries to almost force who's taking the shot, not that we're taking the shot, right? I think that's going to have to be McNeese's key to this game because, again, they have not historically, under Will Wade, have not been a good team at running people off the three-point line. Alabama also, when Will Wade was at LSU, Alabama set their three-point record in the Maravich Center because they just lit it up from deep, right? He didn't do a great job running Alabama off the three-point line there, right? So this is a situation where if Will Wade does not run Alabama off the three-point line, like he has historically not done very well at, this game could get ugly, especially if Alabama is making shots. And I would not bet that Alabama is going to go 19% in back-to-back games, right? I do not think that is a winning formula if you're hoping that Alabama just shoots very poorly in back-to-back games, because I really don't expect that this team will shoot that poorly. Again, the shooters that were taking the shots in the last game with Reitzel and Sears are who you want taking them. And I just don't think that Sears is missing 5 and Reitzel's missing 8 shots from deep. I just don't expect that to happen a second time. And so, like I said, that's the big keys for me. The other thing in this one as well is for the third straight game, Alabama's going to have a massive size advantage. In the starting lineup, McNeese has 6'3", 6'3", 6'5", 6'6", 6'9". And then their biggest guy is 6'9", 215. And then coming off the bench, they have a 6'8", 225. This is not a very large team, right? Cliff Amore, Grant Nelson, Latrell Wrights, Jaron Stevenson, Aiden Sherrill, they're all going to have size on everyone on this court, right? So I fully expect that it would not surprise me if Alabama tries to do, get the ball down low to some guys that potentially can have some success. And then when they crash in on the forwards, you try to kick out for open threes. Obviously Alabama's kind of game plan from the word go, but I just don't think that one-on-one McNeese has the guys to be able to defend Alabama, right? You are going to need to have some decent ball handling from your forwards in this game, because I do think that sometimes when you have smaller forwards, like your 6'9", your 6'8", going up against a guy like Cliff Amore or Grant Nelson, they can get up under them sometimes and force some turnovers. So you are going to need to just watch that and see how they are defending, because this is a situation where I think that if McNeese is going to have some success, they could potentially use some athleticism and speed to cause issues with Alabama's forwards. But again, I personally think that Alabama has a lot of success in this game. I don't think that Will Wade's going to do a good job running us off the three-point line. I'm going off of history here. He has not historically done a great job running us off the three-point line when he's faced Nate Oates. Last season, they were next to last in the entire country at number of three-point shots attempted by their opposing teams. This is just not a great team at running people off the three-point line, even as good as they are on defense. And I think that Alabama, because of our ability to this is the best team so far under Nate Oates in having turnovers. Alabama has done a pretty good job at not turning the ball over. I think that Alabama is able to have Mark Sears, Aiden Holloway, LeBaron Philon, find open guys, and I think that Alabama shooters kind of go off in this game, and I expect a pretty big win, honestly. I do think that Alabama breaks the century mark. I think that the 88 points of the Arkansas State game, I think, was more of a situation where Alabama shot so poorly from deep and from the free throw line that they didn't cross it, but I fully expect them to cross it in this game. I would look at this game to be somewhere around like maybe 105 to 78, maybe. I do think that Will Wade's good enough to keep it, somewhat close for the first half, but I do think that Alabama's skill can win this game and can win this game going away. If this was a blowout, I don't know that it truly shocks me. If Alabama just comes out and lights it up from deep, I don't know that truly shocks me. Again, I don't know that it truly shocks me if McNeese keeps this a super close game, right? I think that anything could happen, but I think that it's a much higher likelihood that Alabama wins this game and wins this game going away, just due to how Will Wade likes to defend and what he's done historically in his time at LSU as well as at McNeese. So that's what my thoughts are on this game. I think that this is going to be a very good game in Coleman Coliseum. I'm fully expecting there to be some FBI jackets and things kind of as tribute to Fluff and tribute to all of the investigations of past. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the delayed upload. Like I said, had some car troubles, and so, got this out as quickly as I could. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.